Hey YouTube, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me again at the table today. We are going to talk about your experience section of the LinkedIn profile. So pull up a chair, relax. Can't wait to have you join me. When you're looking at your LinkedIn profile, the experience section is probably going to be one of the easiest things that you will be able to alter to make sure that you fit the job that you're trying to get into. But what do you do? How do you build that profile and how do you build that experience section to really get that recruiter and hiring manager to reach out to you because you've already put in all that effort in your headline, your banner, your profile picture, your about section. You've got the hook in them. Now what? That's what we're going to talk about. Let's look at the anatomy of the experience section, how it needs to be structured, and what are some of the key things that you can do to make sure that you meet all
All
of the
right. So
requirements
again, I'm going to
for
use
a
my
job
profile as an
position.
example so that you can get
When I
hired.
look at my experience section, I am going to take a look at the title. Now, again, the title is going to be a mirror of what you've already done for your profile. Your headline matches your about section, matches your experience section. It needs to be synchronized across the board. Again, you don't want to make the hiring manager or the recruiter guess as to what you have done. Make sure you're using industry specific terms. Don't use a specific title for a company. Now, the one exception to this rule, if you are only looking at a company and that's the end all be all, you're never going to work for anyone else. Example, let's say you want to work for Amazon and the only thing that you have your eyes set on is an Amazon dedicated cloud engineer. Then you can put that in your experience section. The problem with that is it removes you from the running from the rest of the pack. So if you are a cloud engineer, that is going to get you more attention from recruiters and hiring managers across the board. Facebook, Meta, Google, Amazon, even some of the other companies that are out there, Booz Allen Hamilton. So many different companies that utilize cloud services that you could potentially remove yourself from if you're using a very specific job title. So be careful with that. Once you've got your job title set, now we need to take a look at how to build it out. So I'm looking at my experience section here. The very top of the experience section should be your elevator pitch. What did you do in this role? Make sure to use quantifiable data. Did you lead a team? What are some of the things you worked on specifically? How many projects did you complete? How many penetration tests have you completed in this role? Those are some of the big key things that you want to highlight. Now remember, your about section was the umbrella overview. You got the hook in the recruiter, but now you need to give them specifics and details. Here is how we're going to do it. Give them that elevator speech right here at the beginning. It should be quick enough to where the recruiter or the hiring manager can take a look at it and really get a sense and idea of what you have done in that role. After that, now we're going to get into the specifics of what software did you use? How many projects did you complete? How many penetration tests did you complete? Did you have to do reporting on those penetration tests? This is where you're going to get into the fine details, the nitty gritty of it. The reason why this is so important is because the experience section of a LinkedIn profile is searchable. So if I were to go into the top here and type into the search bar, I can find people based off of the words that are used in your experience section. Make sure you are doing your job to look at all positions. Now, a couple of tricks that I use specifically when I am building my experiences is I want to make sure to look at the different jobs that are out there. Use LinkedIn. Type in an industry standard name for a job position. Go to that job description of all the different companies and figure out what they're really looking for. Maybe every company across the board wants you to understand Microsoft Excel. That is a guaranteed across the board. Everyone wants that. Add that to your profile. Now, for skills, I would really recommend that you stick around for one of my other videos where I'm going to talk about skills specifically, but we're going to touch on it just a little bit here. So this is my edit experience, and down here towards the bottom, you will see that I have specific skills attached to this experience. Now, the only way to do this, and I'm not a big fan of it for LinkedIn, but you actually have to go to the skills section, click on each individual skill, and then add that skill to your experience, and it gives you little checkboxes. I would much prefer if it gave you the option here to click an add skill button and be able to add all the various 50 skills that you have listed in your profile. That would have been a little bit easier. Unfortunately, LinkedIn doesn't do that, so you're gonna have to put in the legwork for this one. But for things like Microsoft Excel, that's easy. You can put that as a skill, add that to this experience section, and you're great. But what about all the other things? What do I do for those? Well, that's where you're going to go through, and you have 2,000 characters to add in all of the different things, softwares, technologies, tools that you use to your profile. This is going to get you hits from those recruiters and hiring managers that are trying to find specific things. An example being, in this position, I had to build different types of Ethernet cables. So I've had to build Cat5, Cat5e, Cat6, Cat7 cables. Well, I've added those specific words to the profile. That ensures that if someone's trying to find someone who can build a cable, they can find me. But that's not everything. Make sure to include the software that you use. If there's different type of operating systems that you use, maybe it's a Windows system, maybe it's a Linux system that you're using. What types of Linux systems do you use? Add all of those things to your profile. It makes it a lot easier for recruiters and hiring managers to find you. And that's the real goal. Now, once you're done with that, close out of that. Make sure that your experiences are timed correctly. And what I really mean by that is you have one experience that leads to another that leads to another. Now, for those of you that have job gaps, this is one of the great things that LinkedIn has done just recently is they actually give you an opportunity to add in an experience that's a job gap. So for mothers that are out there that decide to focus on family, you have the opportunity to put in that job gap in there and then add in what you've done during that job gap. So it doesn't have to be this end all, oh my gosh, I didn't work during this time. You actually can talk about it now and put it in there and let that employer know up front, hey, yes, I didn't work, but I was working on other things, raising a family, upskilling, making sure that I was ready for the job market. Lots of things that you can add in using 2,000 characters. Highly recommend you take the opportunity to do that. The other big thing about the experience section that I want to talk about is using the correct logo for the companies you work with. Now, caveat, not all companies have a LinkedIn page, which means if you are in one of the smaller companies that don't necessarily have a big presence on LinkedIn, you may not be able to find the company that you work for because it's so small. Generally speaking, though, most companies will have a LinkedIn page, a business page that you can reference. Examples: worked in the Navy, so I have the actual Navy logo. Now, this is for all my service members that are out there. If you work at Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Space Force, Air Force, doesn't matter what it is, a lot of commands will use their own logo for their command. Now, lots of different theories on this. My personal take is Use the official logo for everything. That way your experience is tied together. My Navy is for this entire time frame here. If I had broken it up by individual commands, yes, I could use the individual commands logo, but then it breaks up my experiences to show that I have had different jobs every 2 to 3 years at most. It could be good or bad. For other things, most other companies, organizations you volunteer for, nonprofits that you work for, those can be added in as well. Again, make sure you're using the correct logo. So that talks about the experience section in more detail. My recommendation and final tips are going to be this: do your research. You have to go onto LinkedIn, you have to go to the search bar, and you have to look for your specific industry's job titles. When I build out my profile, I skimmed through probably close to about 300 job titles, and I typed it all in. I figured out what the best words to use in my experience based off of what I was able to pull from those job titles. What was the common theme for all of them? What were some of the tools that they requested that I had knowledge in across the board? This is going to take time. It is not going to be an easy process, but there are a couple things you can do to kind of cut down on some of that. Look at other professionals. You will find other professionals in the field that are already a project manager. Look at their experiences. See what they talk about. Now, I'm not saying you should go out and copy and paste everything they have in there in their own experience section, but what I do recommend is take a look and see what they are highlighting. Because if they're highlighting a specific project management tool that is common across the industry, make sure that you can add that to your profile. Get some knowledge on it. Upskill. Add that so that you can get found for that same thing. That's going to cover it for today's video. Thank you so much for joining me at the table. Stick around because next we are going to dive into the next section of a LinkedIn profile. I hope you have a beautiful day. Take care. Enjoy yourself.